Three ball from CG43. They're in front.
This is flat out ridiculous.
From a beautiful left hand, in and out finish, the old-fashioned way.
Newell gets to the basket with one to come. From there again. You have got to be kidding me. Tyson step, wraps it up.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the NBL Pocket Podcast. It's good to have you here. Joseph Core here. No Andrew Kenyon today. We're doing something different this episode. In the past, we've had guests with NBL, NBA, and basketball connections. We've also had writers who've written about sports in general, and this interview falls into that latter category. With me today is Trevor Kraus, author of Ticketless, a great book about sneaking into sporting events and doing it rather predictably without a ticket, thus Ticketless. I can highly recommend this book. If you're planning on buying a copy, please do so via the Booktopia affiliate link in the description. Doing so helps the show. Trevor was fearless both in his sneaking in behaviors and in his writing of this book, Ticketless. From his unique, or perhaps even better described, troublesome relationship with his father, to hopeless romantic failures, to confronting the dishonesty and perhaps even immaturity of what he was doing, Trevor Kraus played this book with great style and grace. And for that reason, it's really worth a read. I think this interview, when you hear it, after listening to it, you'll want greater context. And so you want to go out and buy a copy of Ticketless. But for now, come with me and Trevor for a deep dive into the pages of Ticketless with its author, Trevor Kraus. Trevor, for the people at home that probably maybe haven't read your book, introduce yourself. Who's Trevor Kraus? I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Well, I'm just a big sports fan. From St. Louis, Missouri. I was born in 1991. And you know me as a gate crasher, a spin mover. I wrote the book Ticketless. It was published in January of 2019. And it details how I snuck into some of the biggest sporting events on the planet, from a Wimbledon final to the Super Bowl here in the U.S., the game of the century in college football, Game 7, and other games of the World Series in 2011, all without paying, without a ticket, and basically just by running in.
And give the people the pitch of your book. The book is Ticketless. It's how I know you. Give people the elevator pitch on, what it is, but also why they should go out and get a copy.
Well, the subtitle is how sneaking into the Super Bowl and everything else almost held my life together. So, real quick elevator pitch. Ticketless is how my troubled relationship with my father and rocky romantic experiences informed and influenced my gate crashing career, my spin move career. Those three angles kind of mirror each other. And so I wrote a book that's not just about spin moving or gate crashing. It's about all of these three aspects and how they were interwoven in my college days.
For the people at home, there are rules to spin moving that you dictate in the book. For the people at home, tell people what is spin moving and then sort of the machinations of it a wee bit.
Spin moving is what I intended to do, to physically spin out of the grasp, out of the reach of a ticket taker or an usher at a sporting event and get away. I didn't end up having to spin, but I liked the terminology of it, and I liked the connection to, the Madden video games where you would press the O button and your running back would spin, right, to elude a tackler. So I kept the term, but spin moving is sneaking into a game without a ticket. And my usual method, the standard method, is to, just run in, pass the ticket taker when they ask you for a ticket, and get lost in the crowd. If you think about your typical sporting event, you've got these big concourses before a game that are packed with fans, all wearing the same color, the home team's color. And if you, without a ticket, are wearing that same color, you're going to get lost in the crowd pretty easily. And as I learned as a ticket taker myself in high school, there's no layer past that initial ticket taker. There's no real layer of security. Security is so tightly concentrated right on the entrance. So if you get past that, you're home free.
Trevor, if you can hear me, would you recommend spin moving? If people are thinking about it but they're scared, or even if people are not even thinking about it, this is not on their radar at all, why would you recommend it? What does it do for a person?
I think it teaches you a lot about yourself. The adrenaline kick that you get from doing it, whether you have the guts to even go through with it. I have a friend, one of them in the book, he would be ready to spin move and then kind of chickened out, and he learned a little bit about himself through that process. So I would say this: if you're going to do it, make sure it's a special event with a special people that you're going to meet up with inside and share the game with. Make sure it's an event that you wouldn't be able to afford otherwise, but that would be special to you. A great atmosphere, a unique championship on the line, or the first title for a team in 100 years, something like that. I don't want to encourage anybody to do anything that they're not comfortable with, but if you're kind of a rebellious personality, and if you're reasonably sure you can get away with it, and you want to learn a couple things about yourself, who am I to stop you?
Let's focus on the book. Tell me about the process of writing it. Did you do it on a laptop? Did you do it with a pen and paper? Did you write out a plan and write it, or did you just sort of do it as a diary entry at the end of each day? Tell me about the actual process of writing it from pen all the way to publishing.
Yeah, so this book, this beautiful paperback, started out just as a Microsoft Word document, like so many others in history probably have, so many other books. Started writing it. It was just a compilation of spin move stories toward the end of my college days in, say, 2013, 2014. And the real turning point was when I published an excerpt on Medium.com, an old website called The Cauldron that was run by Sports Illustrated at the time. And my editor, Matt Rudnitsky, he read the story. He saw a kindred spirit. He was my age, also a big sports fan. He had a little spin moving experience himself, and he wanted to get into book editing and book coaching. He reached out and he said, Trevor, I want to help you make this book come to life. And over the following 5, 6, 7 years, he and I went back and forth with, countless Microsoft Word documents, going through tons and tons of hours of edits, from moving whole chapters around to moving commas and taking out comma splices and, cleaning up punctuation. And so he walked me through the whole process, and he was great. He went on to launch his own book coaching company and publishing company called Platypus Publishing. He'd want me to mention that. And my book, Ticketless, was really his first major success. So it was really once he came on board and was willing to help me really focus on what story I wanted to tell. It was only after that what was just a compilation of spin move stories became so much more, from my relationship with my dad to my failed romantic endeavors and all of that. That was really the turning point when I had a trusted editor and publisher get on board.
So with the help of him, and we thank him very much because it's how I've got the book, but turning now to other people we want to thank, page 268, and hopefully you can hear me over Riverside. We've got all kinds of technical problems, but 268, the Mount Rushmore of sports gate crashing. James, Leo, One Eye, Connolly, Hyman, Pinky, Ginsberg, Dion Rich, Scott Kerman. Who are these people, and who are they to you, Trevor?
Well, I thought it'd be fun to do a little research into my predecessors, in addition to telling my own story. And so these are the 4 people I could find from historical documents, old newspaper articles. These were the four I thought who had the most success. One Eye Connolly and Pinky Ginsburg are from the old days, so we're talking the early 1900s up through the 50s, 60s, 70s. I think for Pinky, snuck into back then. It was a lot of horse races and boxing matches, baseball games. Pinky Ginsburg snuck into I know a big Muhammad Ali fight at the New Orleans Superdome. And then Dion Rich and Scott Kerman are more contemporary. They did a lot of their gate crashes in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and have a few of their books too. Let's see. Yeah, so this is Dion Rich's. He passed away recently, but he snuck into the Super Bowl, Confessions of the World's Greatest Gatecrasher. He snuck into the Super Bowl. You see him carrying Tom Landry off the field at one of the Super Bowls, and he also snuck into awards shows. You see him there with, President Bill Clinton, and that's Gwyneth Paltrow, Tiger Woods. So he did more than just sports. And then Scott Kerman wrote No Ticket, No Problem about a lot of the same things, sneaking into concerts, Super Bowls. What sticks out to me from his book was how he dressed up as a peanut vendor for a Super Bowl, I think back in the 90s, and got in and then ditched the peanut vendor costume and was able to see the game. So those are the four. There are a ton of other people. I'm far from the only one who's done it. But I did want to acknowledge some of them because their stories are crazy and they're colorful, really fascinating characters.
Hopefully this one comes through, this question. How do their methods differ from yours? What did you do? You had a real gut punch method. See the gap, go for it. Did they, if I'm not mistaken, the last two men that you mentioned, their style was more cunning. They would dress up as the people, work craft service, things. What was different in their approach? What was different in their methodology? You had a very strong set of rules that you abided by, and a methodology, and a practice, and an ethos. What was different? And what was similar?
Yeah, they were a lot craftier. I mean, you see it here on the front, on the cover. He's sneaking in a trash can, which I also did once. But more often than not, they were more, let's say, subtle about it. They would sneak in with big crowds and not run. Like what I did was obvious. You know, if you were watching, it would be clear this guy does not have a ticket. What they did with various costumes. One Eye Connolly, I think, dressed up as a police officer one time and got in. So they were definitely more subtle, using costumes, and snuck in under the radar. And another big difference is that they sought to do more than just attend the game. They wanted to get photographed, with the coach, get on the field like Dion Rich did here. He's carrying off the Super Bowl winning coach on the field. They wanted to get into the locker room. They wanted to get photos with celebrities, athletes, and stuff. That was never my goal. I wanted to get in and then kind of disappear. Just see the game from the very top row. I never had any interest in getting a first row seat or getting into the locker room or getting on TV. I was there for the game. And so I would say those are the two main differences.
And for people out there that are listening and saying, what you did was wrong, you stole, give people your ethos about it, how you rationalized it politically and socially in your own mind. You talk about it in the book, but I wanted to hear it from...
Yeah, it's an interesting legal conundrum, kind of, because that's the, theft is what people say. Oh, you're stealing. But then when you ask them, what am I stealing? What did I steal? Well, that's a little harder to define. It's not a physical object, right? It's not really the value of the ticket, because I wouldn't have gone anyway. Like if I had not snuck in, I wouldn't have gone at all. And in fact, by sneaking in and then buying a beer and a bag of peanuts or popcorn, I'm actually giving more money to the event organizers than they would have had if I had just not gone at all. So, and I'm not taking anyone else's seat, because usually I would find an open seat or stand somewhere. So it kind of comes down to stealing an experience in a way, but that's not really a tangible thing. So trespassing is what is what it boils down to, which is certainly a lower category of crime than theft. And how do I rationalize it or justify it? In the book, I said it differently, that I was trying in some way to get back at these evil sports owners who, for example, moved my St. Louis Rams to Los Angeles, and I'm still a little bitter about that, and just sort of money grubbing owners. But I've evolved to think to sort of hate the game and not the player. I no longer have the same animosity towards sports owners that I once did. It's more the tax structures and the political process that they take advantage of to get favorable tax deals and tax breaks, and basically welfare from cities who build them new stadiums. So that's really where I would point my anger nowadays, is the political process that gives wealthy sports owners access and privilege to things like tax breaks for land and stadium construction.
Nicely done. I concur.
And I would add, if a stadium is publicly funded,
It's yours.
isn't it closer then to like a public library or a public park, than it is some gated community? I don't know. It's an interesting legal question, but it's certainly not cut and dried.
I bought it. I bought why you did it. I bought how you did it. And I think people who get a copy of Ticketless will feel the same way. Now, hopefully you hear me, Trevor, but this is what I wrote when I finished the book. I wrote, finished reading on the morning on the tram to work. This is all just for me, but I felt sad when I finished. I felt like the character of Trevor got closure, but the reader maybe didn't. Extra innings should have been cut or inserted in the body, is what I wrote. The author was fearless in his portrayal and descriptions of himself and events. Some moments were painfully cringe. I hate to admit that I related at times. The themes for me are, is sports a problem or a fix in this person's life? The relationship between fathers and sons, the balance of the moment, a memory, and nostalgia is a huge part of this book. I also think it's about possession versus love. Is this an American concept? And I wrote here, I enjoyed this book. I loved the concept of it and the thrill of the activities within. This didn't feel like a novel on purpose. It seems like a story of a series of diary entries with threads running through it. I'm excited to speak to the author. In closing and summary, the book for me was about shared consciousness and perhaps the manufacture of memory. Has the American consumerism and ownership and possession consume sports, romance, memories, and everything in between is what I wrote. I don't know if that's too pontificating, but I maybe some of those things work. I mean, that's what I wrote when I finished it. What do you think of that?
Well, I'm so glad that it evoked some deep thoughts and some pushback, certainly. It sounds like it really made you think, and probably took you on the emotional spectrum, from the high adrenalines of the spin moves to the lows of my father's death and just outright depression over not having a girlfriend and loneliness. And that was the point. I wanted to take people on a journey throughout the emotional spectrum, kind of like sports fandom does. That's another theme of the book, that how my life is so thoroughly, and my worldview is so thoroughly informed by sports fandom. So as far as closure goes, I totally understand where you're coming from, because the story is still evolving. I published it in 2019 when I was, how old was I? 28? About to turn 28, I guess. 32 now, about to turn 33. So yeah, there's definitely more to the story. No more spin moves since it was published, but my perspective on all of that is still evolving. And so I did want to, I think it ends with a powerful, powerful image kind of coming full circle where the very first spin move and the very last spin move take place in the same place, and I won't give it away because I don't want to spoil it. But yeah, I wanted to have some closure, but I didn't want to pretend as if I had all the answers because I'm still living and still finding things out.
It doesn't end with everything wrapped up. Some things are wrapped up, and it ends where it starts in a way. And I did like it. I enjoyed it. It was kind of like the end of Spartacus. Like, it wasn't just all primroses. I have this question for you, Trevor. Who's the servant, who's the master out of you and your sports fandom? At the time of writing and now, who's the servant and master of sports fandom for you?
That's a great question. At the time of writing, probably sports fandom. Like, I would stop short of calling it an addiction because I still felt like I had some control over it, over what games I went to. But I kind of had to watch every single Blues hockey game, for example, every single Mizzou basketball game. I had to watch, and now I think I've got better control over my sports fandom, a little healthier approach to it. I listen to more games on the radio so I can be out walking, for example, getting some exercise and sunshine instead of just, in a dark basement staring at a TV screen. Probably go to fewer games and don't spend as much on tickets. I haven't snuck in. Speaking of tickets, I haven't snuck into any games in a good while. Fortunate enough that I have a job now and more disposable income, so I just buy tickets now. In fact, I'm a season ticket holder for Mizzou basketball and Blues hockey. So now I think I've mastered it, and writing the book helped me get to that point. It was really overcoming the fear of putting it out there that was powerful and helped change my approach. Also, the Blues won the 2019 Stanley Cup, which I'm still in awe of. I can't believe it. And one of the themes I explore in the book is, can there ever be another first? Right? So that was the Blues' first championship, their first Stanley Cup. Now, if they were to win another one, a second, a third, you get the law of diminishing returns, in my view. So I'm not quite as passionate as I once was, not quite as desperate to see them win that first championship, because they did it.
Here's a quote in the book I like. And I don't know if you're flattered by this, but this thing, my copy is dog-eared. It's got writing in the books, in the margin. I paid attention when I read it. And this is just one of the many quotes I liked. I said, you wrote, "I couldn't shake the feeling that having wasn't really what I wanted. If I had it all, why would I keep going all in?" That to me sums up pretty much, if you had to just distill the book, that sums up the book. This thing of like, you want it, but you don't. And when you get it, you probably wouldn't know what you wanted to do with it anyway. I don't really have a well-formed question on this, but yeah, that quote, when you hear it and think about it, what does it stir up?
Yeah, there's a great, another way to put it, there's a great Spock quote. I'm not a Star Trek guy at all, but someone sent it to me once, having read the book, and said it summed it up really well. That I forget what exactly he said, but it was something like the desire, the pursuit is more valuable and often more rewarding than the ultimate goal, or you could say the journey is greater and more important than the destination, right? So as that pertains to sports fandom, like I kind of alluded to about the Blues' first championship, it was the wanting to win a title, the journey, the desire that kept me going, that kept that fire burning. And having won it, well, that fire has died, and it's probably more complicated than that. There are more reasons, and in the case of hockey, we went through a weird COVID season, and there's all this weirdness, and the game itself has changed. There are so many more reviews. Games seem to take longer and longer and are just more aggravating, and those kinds of things never had gotten to me. So now the wanting isn't quite as powerful, and so yeah, the if you have it all, if you're the guy who's got everything, as I thought I wanted to be early in the story,
Yeah,
what are, why are you even living? Why are you
I
gonna
know.
what are you gonna pursue,
It's this weird
right?
human
And
quandary.
so
Yeah.
that pertains to sports fandom, and I made this connection with romance too. I was in a fraternity. Everybody around me had girlfriends, and I wanted that so badly. But like I said, I couldn't shake the feeling that having it wasn't what I really wanted. What I most enjoyed was the identity of being the hard luck loser, of being the guy who just never quite got there. People talk about or they did before the Cubs won the World Series, the Chicago Cubs in baseball were the lovable losers, but they're only lovable because they lost all the time because they had never won the World Series in anybody's living memory.
And I think that's interesting. That's a long portrayal in just media culture, right? That kind of, you see it in sitcoms all the time, where even teen dramas, where it's like there's the bad boy and the nerdy kid, and the girl kind of goes with the nerdy guy, the cool guy for a while, and then shifts focus. And then when that happens, it's normally like the end of the series. It ends, because there's not that turmoil anymore, and it's bizarre, and it's such an unfair, cruel depiction. And yeah, your book is like that, the sports version of that, where you're thinking you want to win and you want to, this will prove something, and it really doesn't at all. And you've created all this in here. It's a good case study.
What, and I certainly not the only one. I would argue that if people were to really dig down and really seek to understand themselves, I think a lot of them would find what they care about most is the identity of the journey, the chase, the identity that they find in pursuing something rather than having gotten it. And I get into this argument with friends all the time who are fans of the New York Jets, for example, who haven't won a Super Bowl in a long time. Or I say, what you really love, and this comes through in their text messages and their Instagram and Twitter posts. This comes through so clearly. What you really love is the identity of this person who's just been beaten down by so many difficult losses. And when are they ever going to win the Super Bowl, the World Series, the Stanley Cup? That identity, I think, is central to their sports fandom. And if they were to ever lose that identity, well, what would you be left with? You would have the memory of a Super Bowl championship, which is valuable and important, but memories, as I put it in the book, memories lose their crispness, their definition, the further away you get from them. Whereas dreams seem to only gain clarity the more you dream about them. So that's one way to think about it. And my friends will push back on that. They'll have their arguments, but that's how I see it.
It's powerful stuff, people. Copy of Ticketless. I agree. And this idea of nostalgia and concocting a memory, it really, really spoke to me. I want to talk about this. In the book, you mentioned another book and another famous figure, Frank Abagnale Jr., I would say star of, but the subject of Catch Me If You Can, that super famous film that I don't know about in America, but here in Australia, the damn thing plays every year at Christmas time. And
one of my favorites.
it's an amazing film. I've watched that 100 times. Gosh, who are we kidding? That just speaks to the male experience. I think the human experience, but especially the male experience. I don't want to genderify things, but so page 211 of Ticketless for people playing at home. You meet Frank Abagnale. He comes to your college, I want to say, and describe for people that, and you kind of challenged him. And in the book, I wouldn't say you took shots at him, but you were kind of like you had this film. It was such a big thing. And if people have heard him speak on the internet, he is very dry. He's like, yeah, that was fun, but I'm an FBI agent now, and I play by the rules. And you were underwhelmed. Would I be correct in saying that, Trevor?
Oh, well, underwhelmed would be an understatement. Yeah, I mean, I flipped to the page you referenced, 211. Thank you for that. The greatest con man of all time, I called him. And really he was. I mean, if you've seen that movie, and like you, I'm a huge fan of it, watched it tons of times. I mean, he's flying all over the world, writing fake checks.
Unbelievable.
He's sleeping with Jennifer Garner. I mean, this guy is incredible. But in real life now he works for the FBI. And I said, yeah, I was disappointed by the real Frank Abagnale, an aging, law-abiding FBI consultant whose escapades were long over. And when I asked him a question about what holes still exist in all these security systems, whatever, just in case anybody really wanted to take advantage nowadays, he said, "Oh, don't be like me. You don't want to do that." It was kind of a non-answer, and so yeah, he definitely has lost. And I mean, he's older now, but he's definitely lost some of the vigor, I guess, and he's just a FBI agent now, and that's disappointing. I hope never to become quite that much of a buzzkill. I hope if we're having this interview in 50 years or the 50th anniversary of the publication of Ticketless, I hope I'm still. I'm not going to encourage people to do anything, like I said, that they're uncomfortable with, but I'll give them still the wink, wink, nudge, nudge that, hey,
Maybe
here's
just
some
once.
things you can think about. Yeah, if who am I to stop you? And if you are interested, well, I can maybe point you in the right direction. I've had people reach out to me on social media asking me about this event or that, the Super Bowl, and I've given them some general thoughts. It's difficult without having been to the actual venues that they're asking me about, but I point them in the right direction, and
There's no liability there. You're just talking. But yeah, I've seen Frank Abagnale, and I've read his book with Stan Redding. Books are a theme here. I've read a lot of them. And yeah, and in early interviews, he was like that because he went on Johnny Carson and he talks about hooking the hooker, if you've seen that on YouTube. And now he's just like, it's rehearsed because you can go to YouTube and see the same speech and he does it verbatim over and over. So when I heard those, I was like you. I was like, oh, this guy's done something different. But it begs the question, both with Ticketless and Catch Me If You Can, the book and his experience, is this all just in the soup, the miasma of misguided youth and a response to childhood trauma? Because Frank Abagnale, his parents divorced, he takes off. He's only 18, he's on the road for only a couple of months, a couple of years doing what he did. Your spin moving experience really only exists, and in the book, it's a response to your father's death, and then you do it for a short while and have now sequestered it. I pose that question to you, Trevor. What do you think?
yeah, I tell people I'm not officially retired. If the perfect circumstances were to pop up again with the perfect people in the perfect place, yeah, I might think about it. It still certainly would be very easy to do at 99% of American sports stadiums anyway. But I'm just more selective now about what I would do. And generally speaking, yeah, I could wrap it up as a college indulgence or whatever you want to say. In fact, there's a scene in the book where I'm asking a professor, hey, what do you think about this? And he said, yeah, just as long as you portray it as, just youthful indiscretion, then that's fine. That would be disingenuous, a little dishonest if I were to be, real diligent about that, because like I said, I'm not 100% retired, but I got what I needed to out of spin moving. In a lot of ways, it was a response to my troubled relationship with my dad and his death, and it was a way for me to feel cool, feel like a badass, right? Even though I wasn't able to get a girlfriend, I had really struggled in college with romance and with girls. So this was a way for me to feel, hey, I'm doing something cool, even if it's not respected or understood by the ladies out there. So I got what I needed out of it, and now I would be much more selective.
If you're comfortable, describe for people who maybe haven't read the book about your relationship with your father and the circumstances in the book. Don't give away too much, people should read it. But yeah, I mean, the relationship between father and son in Catch Me If You Can is very strong. and in your book also. So yeah, speak to that.
Yeah, so my dad was a kind of a crafty, cunning guy. He's always had a scheme or a plan, or you could call him a rebel. He was always thinking differently, right? Um, and the first time that we snuck into a sporting event, it was 12-year-old Trevor, my my younger brother Connor, and my dad, and we're at Wrigley Field in Chicago. Didn't have tickets, but we just kind of strolled right in. He's holding our hands, put our heads down, walk right past. There was like a construction area, and there are pictures in the book, by the way, in Ticketless of all these of a lot of the places where I spin moved. But anyway, yeah. So having kids helped, obviously. No one would expect a father of two to be sneaking in, and so that was the first time, and that opened my eyes to what I could do. And my sports fandom comes largely from my dad. He taught me everything I know. He taught me to love sports, but he wasn't always emotionally healthy. Man, he had a lot of issues, and so I was constantly struggling with this tendency. What I felt to become like my father was my spin moving, my desire to be sneaky and crafty and to get into these games. Was that a reflection? Was that evidence that I was going to become like my father and be we never had an official diagnosis, but mentally unstable, mentally unhealthy, and alone ultimately. So even though I was enjoying spin moving and it was such a big part of my identity, at the same time, it was evidence that maybe I was trending down the path that my father had taken me down.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. Um, let's say this one. Here we go. Page 268. You quote your roommate Jim. I'll copy it and put it in the chat for you just so you can play along at home, just in case. But as I was saying, page 268, you quote your roommate Jim when he said, "Happiness is only real when shared." And it is a powerful quote, but the only problem is it isn't Jim's. It's from Christopher McCandless from Into the Wild. And the other problem is Christopher McCandless from Into the Wild, if you know him and that book and that film and that media franchise, really, is it's from Boris Pasternak's Dr. Zhivago, where he writes, "An unshared happiness is not happiness." Did you know that? Does that knowledge now cheapen the quote? And what are your thoughts on McCandless? Because there's, again, that Catch Me If You Can, Into the Wild, Ticketless. There is this thread of young men kind of searching for something or someone in themselves.
Yeah, and I never necessarily thought it was my friend Jim who came up with that. I think he attributed it to a high school football coach or middle school football coach or something like that. So it's not his, and probably it goes back long before Dr. Zhivago. You could probably find someone in the earliest days of antiquity saying the same kind of thing. Plato, Aristotle, someone like that. Um, the message is the same, though. What I found as it pertained to sneaking into sporting events is that it was ultimately unsatisfying, a little hollow to do it by myself. But the ones that I enjoyed the most were when I was with Jim, with other friends, and we would sneak in at different entrances, right? We would both use the same method, but different entrances, and we would have a meetup point, section GG, whatever, row 14. And that moment when we got in successfully, got our hearts pumping and adrenaline pounding, and then we would meet up, and then we would get to enjoy the game together and enjoy the fruits of our labor, if you will. That was so much more meaningful than just doing it on my own.
And that makes a lot of sense. And then the idea that there's a parallel between Ticketless and Into the Wild. Young guy, response to trauma, goes off, does something, sets his own rules, does something very off the grid, has an outcome that's probably not too favorable in that book. Your book, bit better of an outcome. What do you see a parallel?
Well, I haven't read that, but I do identify with a lot of people who make their own rules or who question existing authority structures, or who look at a situation and say, why is it like this? Um, and I have trouble connecting with or identifying people who aren't. I mean, I'm just constantly questioning why things are the way they are, ways to make something easier or to get around a silly rule. And I think everyone does that in some situations. I mean, everybody jaywalks, right? Um, but I just do it constantly and every minute of every day, probably. So that's what sets me apart.
Here's my next question. Romance in the book. This is a tough one. Romance comes up a lot in the book. How would you describe your relationship to romance and women at the time of writing? Would you categorize it as healthy, good? I mean, there's some tough moments in this book reading. Everyone's a failed romantic at some point. There's some stuff in here that's really embarrassing. Like you didn't hide from your true self, and I really applaud you for it. I wouldn't have done the same thing myself, but shit, yeah. What do you think?
Well, what I found upon publishing the book was I thought it was going to be embarrassing to put all this out there. Oh my gosh, what are people going to think? What are they going to say? But the details kind of, after someone's read it and a week has gone by, the details kind of fade away. You don't. I mean, think about the last book you read. If it's been a week or two now, you're not going to remember 99% of the words in there, right? You're just going to take away the broad strokes. And what people took away from Ticketless was my courage, bravery, whatever you want to put it, to put myself out there. And that's the lasting image that they'll have, not all the embarrassing romantic stuff, that the cheesy one-liners and the just going over the top for first dates, second dates. I mean, ridiculous stuff. But there's also the connection there to my sports fandom. As a sports fan, it's like you're living and dying with every game, every trade that's made, every transaction the team makes. But with romance, and especially in university, that comes off as intimidating, or it did to the girls that I was interested in. So that's the connection I made, and yeah, you learn that you have to play things a little more slowly than maybe you do in sports. Intensity, just pure burning passion is not, as I found out, is not always the way to a girl's heart.
And I think that many people...
Although for the right person, it might be.
It might be. So many people say, like, sports is a microcosm of life, and I'm like, no, it's not. Like, Ticketless is kind of saying that, like, keep sports where sports is, and because you're so true. Like, that intensity works great for sports fandom and being a sports participant, like, give everything. Romance is different. You got to let it simmer some. And then, and also that idea that you have of the persona of the hard luck loser and shedding that and being like, oh, actually, no, that's a construction and I shouldn't do that. They're what I took from it as well, which is a lesson hard learnt for some.
Yeah, is sports a microcosm for life? I don't know. Are there lessons to be learned and applied from sports? Absolutely. And I'd like to think that I've taken those lessons and applied them to my own life. And more than anything, sports is just a kind of a companion for your entire life. How many things are there that you loved when you were 5 years old that you still love now? Your sports teams or your favorite athlete, maybe. Those are constants in your life. I'll be 80 years old, 90 years old, 100 years old, sitting in the upper deck at a baseball game or a hockey game with my brother, and we'll be talking about players from our childhoods, and so it's something that's always with you. Not a lot of things in life can you say that about. friends come and go, romances come and go, um, hobbies and fads and interests and jobs come and go. But sports, your sports teams, if you're a fan throughout, are always there for you.
It's interesting in that way, and also you're very right. Like it's there always, but at the same time, every year it totally replenishes. And so few things do that. Because a season ends, and you're like, okay, well, that was that. Whether it's good or bad, it has the same outcome. Like spring training's around the corner. Like it's just so it's this weird thing of, as you say it, it's there as a constant, and yet it's so disposable as well. And yeah, sports are crazy. That's what we're trying to say, people out there. Sports are crazy.
And it's hard to keep hanging on. I mean, I'll refrain from going on my soapbox about the way the games have changed, and how long games are, and the replay reviews, and new rules, and conference realignment in college sports, and on and on and on. So yeah, it's hard to hang on, and I'm struggling with that myself. I mean, I'm watching sports less than I used to, reading more, um, which has its pluses and minuses. But I would like to think that in some way, shape, or form, I'll hang on to the the appreciation for sports that I've always had, even if I'm not as diehard in 50 years as I am today. I for the teams at least that haven't won a championship, and there will be a few in my life probably, unfortunately, that will still be pursuing that first title. I think I'll still be as passionate about them as I've always been.
Good stuff. I mean, I agree with you there. Like, I work in sports, and I'm just flabbergasted at how much commercial dollar they squeeze out every second and every minute. And it's just some of the experiences in Ticketless you talk about, like going to soccer games. I would say, overseas. It's hard to tell. I'm in Australia, you're in America, but it's just a different thing over there. It's just there's not that ringing of the experience for every dollar, and I'm getting pretty sick of it. I try to keep my head up like you are, but it's tough. We'll jump onto this. Oh, unless you got a response to that, Trev.
No, like I said, I'm just hanging on to a lot of what I love about sports and trying desperately to tune out what I don't.
Same. Simple question. Who's the hero of the book? Or is there one?
I don't know if there is a clear hero. There are heroes at different points of the story, and they become heroes, and then they cease to become heroes. When I'm young, my dad is my hero, certainly, and then I see some flaws, some cracks in his personality, and ultimately I don't want to turn out to be like him. My friends are my absolute best friends. I mean, I love these guys, and we leave college, and they kind of go their separate ways, and I feel a little abandoned. So they were heroic for me at one point, and weren't anymore. For some people, I am the hero for these exploits of sneaking into Super Bowl, World Series, all these huge events. But then for other people, I'm a villain because what I'm doing is morally wrong. I'm stealing or trespassing. Probably the only character who starts out good and remains good throughout the whole story is my mom, and she's not a major character by any stretch, more of a minor character. So she's the closest thing there is to a hero, but I would say instead of the black and white hero villain dichotomy, a lot of the characters in the book are both heroes and villains, and they're shades of gray.
Last one, Trevor, and then we're going to get out of here. We're approaching an hour. Been very calm. Lastly, healthiest way to consume sports for people. We kind of touched on it before, but I want to leave people with this because this may go up on a sporting network or something. But consumption patterns have changed. Before it was you'd be a season ticket holder and you'd watch the away games on the TV and read the newspaper. That was 20, 30, 40 years ago, whatever it was. Now it's like highlights, Twitter, YouTube videos, little TV shows about the series. what to you is, I want to use the word wholesome. What do you think is the proper, if we can use that word, which has a thing attached to it. What's the proper way to consume sports, or the best way in your mind?
Well, wholesome is a good word, or the proper. Yeah, the most wholesome way to enjoy sports is for each individual to do it how they want to, and all I can give is my answer for how I do it. I'm listening to a lot more games on the radio as I'm out walking, trying to get my 10,000 steps a day in and be in the fresh air as much as I can. I find myself not following the coverage and the hot takes like I used to. Because now you could spend all day, every day, online, Twitter, Facebook groups, reading newspapers, and if you want to, you could spend your whole life analyzing sports, finding different voices and different opinions. And now I'm all about the games. I feel like I'm educated enough sports fan that I can watch the games. I can take my own interpretations from them, and I don't need the chatterboxes on TV to tell me what to think about this player or that play or this strategy or that trade. I'm all about the games now, and less the noise surrounding them. But hey, that's just me. I would never begrudge anybody for going all in and spending all day reading about sports and writing about sports, because that was me once upon a time, and I loved it. I wrote a lot about sports, and I spent my entire afternoon watching Around the Horn, Pardon the Interruption on ESPN, these opinions and hot takes. And hey, if you enjoy that, then go for it. It's not for me anymore, though, and so that's all I can opine on.
Well, people out there, the book is Ticketless. The author is Trevor Kraus. Appreciate your time. An hour's chat. I enjoyed it very much. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed this chat and or want to buy a copy of Ticketless, do so via the Booktopia affiliate link in the description, or just via Amazon. Both are good. I'll try and include both links in the description. Next time on the podcast, Andrew will be back, of course, thank God, and we will be doing a big end of season, start of finals show. We're going to be breaking down the potential off-season moves of the non-play-in teams, so the bottom, 4 teams on the ladder. We're going to mount cases for any individual awards that are in contention. Coach of the Year, probably the most contentious, maybe Sixth Man of the Year. That's always got a bit of iffiness about it. I don't think there's any debate about MVP at the minute. We're also going to give some postseason predictions, and then, of course, we'll talk a little SHIT about any storylines that crop up between now and then. And to leave you all, as Trevor says, Andrew and I, NBL Pocket Podcast, we're just hanging on. And thanks, everyone. And a special thank you to the patrons. You know who you are. You're a huge part of the show, and we appreciate your generosity. Thanks very much. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.